Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. If you want to do one good thing today and help support the channel, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. And our first story of the day is by Linzava. Sorry, I can't run your errands. I'm grounded. So this was back in the early 2000s. I was 17 and had very interesting parents. At least my psychologists have said so. I got my license on my 16th birthday and became responsible for many of my parents' house management responsibilities. I dropped off bill payments before online payments were a thing. You had to drive to their offices if you didn't mail the checks in time, did the grocery shopping, and taxied my sibling to school and doctor's appointments and friends' houses. I was completely on board as I loved driving and I'd always get an extra couple bucks in gas money. But I also spent the previous year homeschooling so I could commute to my mother's company an hour away and work for 40 hours a week for free. So any freedom I got was like scraps at a starving dog. At that point, I pretty much was an adult, but was allowed to go to public school my senior year and reconnect with my old friends from grade school. It was kind of like half being a teen, half adult with the entitlement of a teenager who thinks they're an adult. My family's dynamic was interesting to say the least. I was the oldest, my younger sister was the obvious favorite. Each developmental milestone was met with resistance, and as I grew into new interests like makeup, music, and social activities, my parents insisted on getting the same things for the both of us and giving us the same freedoms at the same time. She was 3 years younger, but the rules were strict for me but never enforced for her. I wasn't allowed to date till I was 18, she was allowed to date at 14. They also brought her shopping all the time, but I was the responsible one, so they signed me up for free work with their social group to increase their social standing. My sister never had to work, but we're so proud of you, you're the only child we can trust with the credit card. Yeah, because I've been contributing to this household since I was 14. It's called child labor. I counted the days till I'd be free of my family, but while I was stuck, I found ways to have fun, and I had a lot of friends. At 17, I was randomly given a curfew. I never actually had a curfew until that month and was used to being out until 2 or 3 a.m. But in their words, you're going to be home by 10 p.m. every night because you keep coming in late and waking us up when you brush your teeth. Yeah, neglect is kind of funny when you look back on it. I especially love that I was a teen who still brushed her teeth every day and it inconvenienced my parents enough to notice me. An additional background tidbit is that my younger sister had been caught with pot in our evangelical Christian family's home. She was in the most trouble she'd ever seen. 1 month grounded, but they let her off the hook after 2 weeks. This occurred the month before the following story. So within a month of my new curfew, I was 5 minutes late getting home. I didn't rush home, I figured it wasn't a big deal. After all, I made their house run and I never actually got in trouble, besides brushing my teeth too late. I pretty much was an adult with adult responsibilities. I could literally ask my mom to call me in sick for school because I didn't feel like going, and she would. Boy, was I wrong. They went nuclear. I was screamed at for an hour and grounded for 2 weeks from the car. Well, growing up in that house, it kind of rolled off my back, but I was pretty angry for my punishment for being 5 minutes late, being equal to my sister's punishment for storing and smoking drugs in our house. I also knew that my parents were about to regret this punishment. I have quite the mean streak when I'm punished, and I'm ashamed to admit, I love torturing them at every opportunity. I know they were expecting me to beg for the car and apologize, but I didn't. I knew exactly what was coming and how little they thought this one through. There's a phrase, don't kill the golden goose. Well, when your entire household runs on the shoulders of a 17-year-old, you've made some bad life choices, especially when that 17-year-old is as smart and reliable as the adults are supposed to be. The next day, my mother comes into my room and asks me to drop off a bill she forgot to mail. This isn't word for word, but here's the gist. Mom said, I have to meet with a client and don't have time. I need you to run this to local utility company. Yes, she never asks, she demands. I, looking up from my book, say, sorry, I'm grounded. She says, well, we'll make an exception. I say no, because then I'll never learn to not be 5 minutes late for curfew. Yes, my smart buttonness was the main reason I wasn't the favorite child, as they explained to me many times. I apparently had an attitude problem from the age of 4. She says, well, I really need you to take this to local utility. If you don't, we'll have to pay a late fee. I say, well, if I'm grounded from the car, I'm grounded from the car. I won't be doing any errands until it's over. She huffed off, realizing her mistake. I never followed up with how that one turned out for her. Over the next week, I started acting like a normal teenager. I walked to my friends' houses, I was only grounded from the car. Would call my parents when I needed a ride home. That was my favorite. I can't be late for curfew and you don't want me walking home in the dark. I actually walked so much and so far that my thighs were rock hard at the end of that week. During that week, my parents looked a mess. They had to drive my sister everywhere and learned how exhausting it really was. They had to actually plan their errands and watch their own kids. I was on vacation. During that week, the request went from, "We'll make an exception," to, "We never meant you couldn't run errands," to, "These errands are the only reason we let you drive that car," to, "Please, just this once, we only grounded you because we love you," to, "You're so ungrateful, you're supposed to be the responsible one." Basically the whole gambit of manipulation. At this point, I'm gaslight proof, and I have actively hated my mom for over 3 years. I was enjoying myself so much that I sometimes wondered why I enjoyed being a psychopath to her when I'm actually not one at all. I have diagnostic proof that I'm not a psychopath. By the end of the first week, I was called out to have a talk with them. My mother was the tougher of the two. My dad was pretty cool, but always sided with her. Mom said, "We've decided you've learned your lesson. We're letting you off your punishment early, but you have to start running your errands again and driving your siblings." I said, "No, I'm good with the current system." She says, "I insist. We don't have time to run errands." I smiled because finally, and say, "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you took away my car." She says, "Well, if you don't run the errands, you can't have the car back." I say, "Fine with me," and I walked out of the room like a proud peacock. After the 2 weeks were up, they assumed I'd be back to normal. Nope. I basically told them that I'd rather walk as the number of responsibilities far outweighed the benefits of driving. They weren't happy, but what could they really do? They lasted 1 more week. I went carless for a total of 3 weeks. Finally, my mom broke down and did the unthinkable. She begged. Well, the words were begging, the tone was sucking up, but I truly enjoyed it. It took all my energy not to beam with self-pride. Now, my mother was a saleswoman. She'd been inadvertently training me for years. In that moment, I opened negotiations. In the end, I got an extra $10 a week in gas money on top of the $3 here or there for unscheduled errands. I still had the curfew, but I got a few minutes grace period from then on. They never even dared to threaten to take my car or license away again, but the cherry on top, my sister's personal taxi service was closed. Apparently, she treated them the same way she treated me during her frequent and unnecessary rides, and from then on, she had to be nice if she wanted a ride. There were a few incidences where she tried to get my parents to force me to take her or tell her where I was going, but they didn't. They knew better than to kill their golden goose of home management, and for the rest of the year, I finally had a great childhood because I was left alone on my own terms. If everything was in reasonable walking distance, would you rather walk wherever you went or have the ability to drive wherever you go but have to run extra errands for your parents and family? Let me know which one you would prefer in the comments down below. Our next story is by Subconscious Consumer, How Not to Order Extra Sauce on Your Pizza. This adventure involves a 16-inch dough, a crapload of pizza sauce, way younger me, and an angry Midwestern lady. I was working a closing shift alone at a pizza shop, minus the drivers on delivery, and I wouldn't say that I really had developed the same sense of urgency I have as an adult now to maintain employment. Granted, I didn't get fired for this. Lady comes in, orders a regular 14-inch cheese pizza with extra sauce to go. At the little family-owned shop I worked for, the menu item, extra sauce, operationally meant that we used a larger ladle to scoop and apply the sauce, but I would come to find that this proportion was not sufficient for this lady. Disclaimer, given that I am undeniably a piece of poop at that stage in my life, human error is a possibility, but I put gosh darn extra sauce on the first pizza. I darn sure did on the second one too. After making her first pizza, I hand it over and she opens the box to inspect it at the counter. I can see that she's not happy with it. Fluently in rude American, she says, "Honey, I know you work at a pizza place, so this is probably hard for you to understand, but I ordered extra sauce on this pizza." She doesn't leave me much room to speak and tells me I need to remake her pizza with extra sauce this time and have it delivered to her place. I'm 100% salty, but I decide to take her address and arrange a comped pizza. As soon as she left, I got to work on my masterpiece. Now, the lady ordered a 14-inch pizza, but I instead opted for a 16-inch dough over a 14-inch screen, allocating the excess dough to the crust for reinforcement. Next, I open a new can of pizza sauce and I pour it directly into the dough mountain I just made. It's a freaking pond at this point. For emphasis, as I lift this pizza puddle off the sauce station, the pizza's noticeably heavy as freak and I have to walk slowly to avoid swishing the freaking sauce everywhere. I would guess it weighed about 4 pounds and the sauce was 3 or 4 inches or so thick. Undoubtedly, it was a threatening and alarming amount of pizza sauce involved. I put some cheese on top, and I have to run it through our oven about 3 times to get it to even cook. It finally cooks and I pack it up, but I can't cut it because obviously the sauce will run everywhere. I did incorrectly assume that anyone else handling this pizza would be able to make that judgment as well. In hindsight, I had the benefit of being there when the sauce was literally dumped on it, so maybe leaving a note advising the customer not to cut the pizza would have been more holy or whatever. I hand the soup to the driver. He doesn't think the stuff is funny and has to hold it in his lap the whole time to keep it from spilling. 50 minutes later or so after the delivery, I get a call. It's the angry Midwestern lady, and she's really mad this time. I gather from our conversation that she made an attempt to slice the pizza and made quite the mess for herself in the process. I didn't say anything funny or witty back, I just gave her the number to use for complaints. But internally, I thought it was freaking hilarious. She sent a scathing review of my masterpiece, which printed at the station next to me and was promptly shredded that evening. Honestly, considering some of the requests I've heard of people as far as what they want on their pizzas or special tricks to do with the pizza like putting stuff in the dough, I'm almost surprised they didn't enjoy that puddle of pizza sauce. And honestly, more impressively, I'm surprised OP didn't get in trouble for that. Now, I don't know how inventory works in a pizza place, but wouldn't it be possible for them to notice that it seems like a whole can of pizza sauce just disappeared? I don't know, maybe it's not that big of a deal. And our final story of the day is by Nubosterone. Yes, I have a cell phone. No, you can't reach me on it. I had a pretty good tech support job in the late 90s at a cool place to work. Since we had an on-call rotation, we had some nice perks. The company paid for a second phone line. Yeah, dial-up modems were still the thing. They also paid up to X amount of dollars a month towards a cell phone or provided a company cell phone. The only constant thing is change. The company was bought up by a large conglomerate. As the Borg assimilated us, they announced that they would no longer pay for personal cell phones and company ones would only be given to those at the manager level or above. As an aside, how stupid is that? Determine who gets a tool by status rather than the usefulness of the tool to the job. The rationale was that everyone has a cell phone nowadays and incidental use for company business should not be a burden. We grumbled, but it was still a cool place to work, so most people went along. Most people, but not Bob. At first, when they collected everyone's contact number, meaning personal cell number, Bob gave them his desk phone number. Of course, emergency calls after hours went to voicemail. Typically, the operations center would call his home number next and usually get him. It took them a couple of on-call rotations to figure out that they didn't have his cell number. After a round of emails asking for it was ignored, he was summoned into the director's office and asked for it. He explained why he felt it was unfair that the company used his asset without reimbursement. He was told it would only be used for emergency, incidental use, and was a condition of his employment. He reluctantly gave it up. Then came the malicious part. Cell phones were pretty basic at that time, talk and text, really simple games. Most of the smarts were in the network. Bob found for an extra $2 a month, his phone line could block callers or send them directly to voicemail. Bob paid the $2 and set the company's outbound caller ID number to go directly to voicemail. When Bob was not on call, he turned off the audio alert for voicemail, and the only indication was a little envelope icon on the phone's 1.5-inch screen. On call, he got the alert, but only called back if he was away from home. Otherwise, he waited for the call on his landline. He said it was the best $2 a month he had spent. I left a year later and Bob was still enjoying his cell phone on his terms. If you understand that most cell phone plans now have unlimited talk and text, back then, you had to pay per the minute, or you had to pay for a set amount of minutes per month. So him being at home and they call him up, if he picked that up, he would be using his minutes for that month on incidental work stuff that isn't getting covered. So by blocking them on the mobile and making them call their landline, they don't have to sacrifice any of their minutes because of work. But unlike Bob, that's all the minutes we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.